You got to hit the... Good, it worked.
The time's now 6:31. We're going to commence tonight's Board of Selectmen meeting, Monday, November 21st, 2022, held here in the Wacoit Meeting Room, Mashpee Town Hall, 16 Great Neck Road North, Mashpee, Massachusetts, 02649. Broadcast live on local cable channel 18, stream live on the Town of Mashpee website. We will convene an open session. I'd like to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice.
And if we could have a moment of silence for all the deaths and people that have lost their lives recently. Thank you. I'd like to accept a motion to approve meeting minutes from Monday, November 7th, 2022 regular and executive session.
So moved. Second.
Hearing a first and second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call vote. Michaela?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. And I'm a yes as well. That motion is unanimous. Those meeting minutes are approved as presented. We're going to go right into public comment. You did not have to sign up for public comment if you're here for the public hearing. So we're going to reserve the public comment to items outside of the public hearing, which I have several names. We'll go in order as they signed up. Donna Fuller, if you could come please to the table and state your name and address for the record. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Donna Fuller. I live on Mashpee Neck Road, and we're concerned about the residential exemption. We've been in Mashpee, been paying taxes in Mashpee since 1972, and we became a full-time resident several years ago.
Ma'am, this is, you didn't have to sign up for public hearing. If you wanted to make comments during the public hearing, specifically for the residential exemption, that would be the appropriate time.
So not now?
Not now.
Okay. So
In a
I
few
get-
minutes, we're going to start.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Elena Doyle?
How are you tonight, David? It's Alana, by the way.
Alana, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you for having me speak. My name is Alana Doyle, Sunset Strip. I had the pleasure of attending the Housing to Protect Cape Cod event sponsored by the Housing Assistance Corporation this month. As we all know, the need for middle-class housing is dire. We're losing housing to our workforce and locals to short-term rentals, second home investments, and inflated prices due to the lack of inventory. While our zoning bylaws prevent us from reasonable housing development, in fact, 90% of the housing in Mashpee currently doesn't conform to today's restrictive zoning standards. During this event, there is much discussion on what potential solutions could look like. One of the speakers described the perfect place for dense building to accommodate a variety of housing needs. This ideal location has existing wastewater infrastructure, is in close proximity to services, transportation, and potential workplaces. This description describes Mashpee Commons perfectly. I am still very discouraged at the outlandish opposition to the proposed expansion to the existing Mashpee Commons development. There is no other location in Mashpee that better fits HAC's description of the ideal place to increase housing production for the middle and working class. While there was a minimum of 10% units to be dedicated to income restrictions, much of our middle class does not qualify for this designation and needs access to market rate middle class units and houses. I understand all the people I understand a lot of the people here have housing security, and it may be hard for some to fully grasp the importance of this topic. Having faced this crisis myself, and not so long ago, had to contemplate the possibility of leaving Cape Cod to buy a home, I understand the urgency at play. I ask all of you to demand we address this housing crisis, especially here in Mashpee. When given the opportunity to collaborate with developers and deliver the housing needed, you should be jumping to work together and help save our local population from having to leave the place that they called home. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa Fry?
My comments were related to the public hearing, so I'll wait till then. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry Cook?
I'm the same, I want to speak during the hearing.
March Heck?
Same. Ditto.
Arden? And Lynn Barbie?
Same.
Thank you. That's all of our folks that have signed up for public comment. The time is now 6:37. We're going to commence tonight's public hearing on the residential tax exemption. Mr. Clerk, if you would read the notice. Yeah, that's the one.
The Town of Mashpee Board of Selectmen Tax Certification Publication Hearing Notice. Under Chapter 40, Section 56, as amended by Chapter 369 of the Acts of 1982 and Chapter 79 of the Acts of 1983, the Mashpee Board of Selectmen will conduct a public hearing on whether the Town of Mashpee should implement the Classification Act. As said hearing, the Mashpee Board of Selectmen will hear testimony as to what will be the fiscal year 2023 residential factor, which will determine the share of taxes each classification of property will pay. That what will be open space factor, and whether there will be a residential exemption or a small business exemption. Said public hearing will be conducted on Monday, November 21st, 2022, at 6:35 p.m. in the Wacoit Meeting Room at Mashpee Town Hall, 16 Great Neck Road North, Mashpee, Mass. You can submit comments and questions via email to Boston, Mashpee, Mass. Government. It's here if it's here.
BOS@mashpeemass.gov. Thank you. So at this time, would we like to ask the town to explain a little bit about it, or jump right into the public hearing? Welcome, Mr. Gibbons.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Joe Gibbons, the Director of Assessing. I'd like to say good evening to the Select Board, Town Manager Collins, Assistant Town Manager Wayne Taylor, and all the taxpayers here and watching on television. The tax classification hearing is held in all 351 municipalities in Massachusetts prior to the assessor's setting of the tax rate and subject to scrutiny of the Bureau of Accounts of the Department of Revenue. Tonight, I'll be talking about a few different things, and I'm going to give a brief overview of the process, review the financial calendar, and I want to go over a few things at first. Any of the figures used tonight are estimates. They're not exact. And any tax rates that are mentioned or in the packets are all proposed tax rates. They're subject to the Department of Revenue approval. The 4 questions tonight that are before the Board of Selectmen, and Tom so eloquently just mentioned, I'll briefly go over those, and one of which we're probably going to spend the majority of the time on. So every community in Massachusetts has to make a determination on those 4 questions. And after that's done, the local officials, the financial officials, can submit all the data into the Department of Revenue, and it's subject to their approval. Basically, tonight's hearing closes the book on fiscal year '22 as we headed into fiscal '23 on July 1. It basically ties together all the financial decisions that were made in the past year in Mashpee. The tax rate will be set based on actual receipts from fiscal year '22, which closed on June 30. I'll give a brief explanation of how we got to this process and step tonight, and then I'll get into the details of the 4 questions that have to be addressed. The assessors received final certification of values on November 3rd. This was after a complete certification of all our values. Public disclosure closed on November 2nd. New growth was approved at $805,000. The 10-year average was roughly $720,000, so we were a little bit over the 10-year average. And those are tax dollars that are added along with the 2.5% increase to the prior year's levy under Proposition 2.5. Our total valuation in Mashpee now is a shade under $8 billion, of which 90% is residential. The other 9+% is commercial, industrial, and personal property. As a result of this certification and approval from the Department of Revenue, the average single-family home in fiscal 2023 was $770,395. A 22% increase from the prior year, where the average value was $641,465. That's good or bad news, depending on where you sit. I have some good news, however, from that calculation. The average single-family home tax bill is only increasing based on a proposed tax rate of $6.94, $196. So even with the 22% average increase on single-family homes, the average tax bill, which was $5,151 last year, would be $5,347, a $196 increase, which is 3.8%, or $16 a month if you're escrowing with a mortgage. So despite the high value increase, the tax rate coming down based on a proposed amount of $6.94 kept the increase at a little under 4%, which in today's terms, compared to the prices of other things, food, electricity is increasing 65%, according to the figures that I read, 4% is a modest increase, in my opinion. Now I'm going to move on to the 4 questions before the Board of Selectmen tonight, 3 of which are not that pertinent to the discussion tonight. In the past, Mashpee has not voted a shift from residential to commercial, has not opted for an open space discount, and has never adopted a small commercial exemption. Those 3 points really don't make a lot of sense in Mashpee for different reasons, so we might as well spend the majority of the time on the residential exemption, which has been talked about going back many years. Looking in the files, I saw the prior director there were files going back to fiscal 14, and it may have, the discussion may have gone on long before that. So I'll give a brief explanation of the residential exemption. Not my opinions, just facts. And it's up to the Board of Selectmen to make it a policy decision one way or another on the RX. I will come out right at the beginning and say the Board of Assessors voted at their meeting last Wednesday on the 16th. Their recommendation is to say no to a shifting of the tax rate, no to an open space discount, no to a small commercial exemption, and the residential exemption, if passed, they recommend a percentage at no higher than 10%. So that is the local Board of Assessors recommendation, and it's only a recommendation. Give me 1 second here. So I'm going to give a brief explanation and definition of what the residential exemption does for people that don't know. The residential exemption shifts residential burden from domiciliary properties to non-domiciliary properties. The percentage, which is voted on by the Board of Selectmen, can be anywhere from 1 to 35%. Currently, there are 16 municipalities out of 351 in the Commonwealth that have adopted this statute. It's been on the books for decades and decades. The majority of those communities are either larger cities or resort areas. The residential exemption amount is defined as, depending on the percentage voted tonight, is of the average single-family, the average residential property. And using a 10% example would be, estimate proposed would be $66,536. Which, with a proposed tax rate of $694 as a natural tax rate, would result in an overall tax rate of $7.07. And the reason why the commercial values would pay a lower rate than the residential values is because there's a state law that says the minimum residential factor has to be 65%. So that would result in the commercial taxpayers paying 13 cents less with a 10% exemption. If you went to the other extreme and went to 35%, that $6.94 would become $7.44, a 7% increase over the natural tax rate of $6.94. So the commercial, industrial, and personal property classes would have a lower tax rate. I will add, from my department's perspective, there is an added workload, which I've polled other assessors in communities that have the residential exemption, and there's a cost to administer this, which is probably, in our department, about a half-time person, solely dedicated to dealing with the residential exemption, because it really affects everything that you do. On abatements, exemptions, sales questionnaires, deeds when they come in, it really affects a lot. And it can be administered, and can be administered well, but there is an inherent cost in voting for this. Also, it should be said that the residential exemption has a revenue-neutral effect on the tax levy. The town does not take in 1 penny of additional revenue. It is, as I said, it's a shift in a pie from one group to another. We still bring in the town brings in the same amount of tax levy. The other issues have been discussed. They'll probably be discussed by the public. There's different opinions on this. It's quite controversial in some circles. I'm not a policymaker. I will administer this, whether it's passed or not, and I'll do my job the same way, whether it's passed or not. There's different opinions on this. Some think it hurts renters because landlords are going to pass that on to the renters. One major issue that I think needs to be addressed and considered tonight by the Board of Selectmen, it's in the packet, is the potential chart with the overlay deficits that may be created by the residential exemption and the growing pains in the first year or two with the residential exemption. We had 2,109 people vetted pre-qualified for the residential exemption. The previous director of assessing had estimated that there are around 57 to 6,200 folks that may qualify for the residential exemption. We had about 2,400 applications, probably only denied about 100. 2,100 were approved, and there's another 100 to 200 that are sitting in our office waiting for, they're called deficient applications. The people have not, we've sent letters back to them identifying that they were missing documentation, and we're waiting to hear from those folks. Another potential hole in the residential exemption is how it's administered. If the selectmen vote tonight to adopt the residential exemption, we have to submit in Gateway in the recap sheet to the Department of Revenue the 2,109 folks that have been approved for the residential exemption, and we can't put in any more. And what that does is the state law doesn't cooperate here. The state law allows people to come in until April 1st. So if we have we could potentially have another 3,000 people come in, we then have to give them the exemption if they qualify, and we have to take it out of a different bucket of money, which is called the overlay. And the overlay typically has $400,000 in it. So we did up the overlay by over $300,000. But if you can see in the shortfall pages, $300,000 doesn't cover a lot of options. We'd have to come up with that shortfall in some other area, or it would come directly out of the fiscal '24 budget, because it would show up as a deficit on the recap sheet next year. If the selectmen could look at the page that I have that has, it says FY '23 residential exemption info at 5, 10, and 20%. Down at the bottom, it shows the corresponding tax rates with the 694, 701 at 5% residential exemption, 707 at 10%, 722 at 20%. And I also have a page that Wayne had recommended that we bring tonight that shows each of the segments, 5%, 10%, 15%, 20, 25, 30, and 35. And it shows the corresponding tax rates. And once again, these are all proposed. They're not etched in stone, but they should be pretty accurate.
Mr. Gibbons, what about trust? A lot of older people have their homes in trust.
We went through, there was a decent amount of people that had trusts, but I would say the majority of the people that had trusts did qualify. The ones that didn't qualify were ones that did not put themselves as a trustee in their trust. If they were a trustee on their trust, in most cases, they were approved. So I would say more of the trust applications were approved than denied. I think I've covered. If there's any other questions you have, I could answer those questions. I didn't want to go on and on here. We have the 4 questions to discuss. 3 are basically pretty routine, and then the RX.
Yes,
If
Mr.
I could,
Manager?
Mr. Chair, can you clarify in terms of additional staff, are you talking yearly or every 5 years?
Annually, I believe we'd need a third to a half-time person every year. And
What
then
would-
in the 5-year certification year, we'd either have to re-vet all the approved applications in that year as well.
So I guess a follow-up to town manager's question would be, that would just be leading up to April 1st, when the deadline's cut off, that you would need the supplemental staff?
No. No, David, this is a year-round. This residential exemption affects everything that we do every day we operate. Every sale, every abatement, every exemption deals, it affects everything that we do in our office. Every deed that comes in, we have to verify and see if they're, what the mailing address is. We have to send them a sales questionnaire, remind them that they can file for the RX, that there's residential exemption. I'll call it the RX, or the law is 5C. So it really affects more than anybody would think. In Barnstable, for instance, they have a full-time person just dedicated to the RX 365 days a year, every year. Granted, they're a bigger department than we are.
Correct. Understood. I was just trying to clarify when
Yeah,
you
yeah.
stated that the, it's a third more time or amount of work with a need for, that would justify a supplemental position. I didn't know if it was over a few months, 6 months, 3 months, or annually. I'll open the floor to any select board members.
I just have a quick one.
John.
So you mentioned the 5 years. Is that, so if members of Mashpee file the tax exemption,
Yeah.
that's good for 5 years before they have to reapply?
Yes and no. It's good if they stay here, if they stay here.
Okay. Oh, I see. So as people move in and move out.
Every
it
month, we get the
starts-
Ds. It's a
in flux.
fluid situation. It just, we have to follow this like, I know more than I want to know about, everything.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Gibbons, so, to your point, I think every 5 years, the town has to requalify everyone, which that's a heavy lift.
Yes, it is. The State Department of Revenue, and it would be rolled into the 5-year certification. So, for instance, these 2,109, let's say we stay at 2,109, we're not going to, but say we had 2,109 people. Those 2,109 applications that we reviewed this summer, okay, will all have to be reviewed within the next 5 years. Meaning they'll have to apply again. We need a new tax form, everything, again.
Does that clarify you? Any other members of the board have questions for Mr. Gibbons?
I do, Joe. It appears to me that they are going to be more involved. It's time-consuming. Even if you have an assistant that you bring in for 2 or 3 days a week, it seems like you're going to be spreading yourself a little thin, especially with this is just setting itself up.
Yeah, I think, Tom, to be honest, I think a lot of it is upfront, but it does change, everything in the office that we do going forward. I think a lot of this residential exemption, and I don't think the politicians or the state really understand the intricacies of it. And it's different for every community, and it's very labor-intensive. Just creating these spreadsheets and just in the last, 4 days since we had some requests for different options, different numbers, different, it really stops you from doing anything else.
Right, and just as I follow up on that now, so right now we have a small group, 2,100 people, right, that are lining up for this. But if it were to pass, I think that everybody would jump on board. Well, it wouldn't make sense. How would you handle that? And what is the procedure, and how long are they going to wait before can they get on immediately?
Yeah, what would happen is if you voted tonight, it's a fluid process. We still have 100 to 200 applications that we're waiting for people to provide documents. We would probably be, in the next couple months, flooded with more applications. Now, right now, I don't have an assistant, but hopefully we will, deal with that. But I'm going to have to bring somebody in and train them, okay? And the 99% of the people are not going to have any experience with the residential exemption. And even if they're work in an assessing office, there's only 16 other communities that administer that. So it's heavy on labor and heavy on training. That's what affects us the most. And the biggest problem I have with the residential exemption is how it's administered. The fact that the pre-qualified people, okay, they're in, but now until April 1st, we can get 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 people come in, and we've already set our tax rate. And these numbers, those 2109, if you vote the RX tonight, before we can set our tax rate, I have to send an Excel spreadsheet to the Department of Revenue that says every person that's getting that, on that. Because in the past, some towns have padded the number, saying, well, we may get another 1,000, or we may get another 500 or 1,000, and that affects the tax rate. So,
Mr. Gibbons, what type of documents are you talking about that you're waiting for or that you need to have to apply? I think this was a problem with a lot of people applying for this. They didn't know what they needed to bring in, or they didn't want to
yeah.
bring it in.
Well, we identified that in the letter that went out in June, but, you know, it's a lot to grasp. But basically, it's your front page of your federal income tax return. To narrow it down for most people. Unless you have, you know, an out-of-town mailing address or a P.O. box, then we require more. We require a license to carry permit or a driver's license or
So your staff has just gone through the process, so they're familiar with what needs to be done now, the people on board now. So, you know, I'm just trying to get my arms around what the heaviest part of the lift is. Is it uploading the forms? Is it manual data entry? Is it, you
it's
know, the
constant-
vetting out of the applications once they've been confirmed complete? What is the heavy lift? And is there software that you have to assist with that?
Yeah, the software is not a problem. But what it is we have to review every application.
The one-page cover sheet from the taxes, or is there
Yeah.
additional?
Yeah, the one-page application plus the income tax form. And we have to vet and verify, though, every application, which means we go in, for instance, there are questions on there, do you own other properties? There's a number of people that own multiple properties in Mashpee. I was surprised at how many people that own in Mashpee, you know, own multiple properties. And we have to research those. We go on the websites of all the Florida counties, you know, other Massachusetts towns. If they own a property in Boston, sometimes we have to contact the Boston assessors. If we can't get the information online, we have to verify that. You know, if you were a good private detective, I could hire you, you know what I mean? And you could come in and, you know, there's a lot of information that, you know, I really don't want to know, you know, and I've learned about, you know, different people.
And then I do.
But that information should be on their taxes, no? If
No,
they own other properties?
you don't put on your taxes if you own a property in Florida or Utah or.
Right, yes, all right.
I don't know that. And the only thing we want the tax form for, and there was confusion about this, Carol, all we want is how you're filing and your address and your signature. We don't want, over half the applications have redacted all the financial, we don't want any of that. We don't want financial information. We just want your, you know, how you file and your address and your signature to show that Mashpee is your domicile. And that's what the state Department of Revenue tells us is the way to vet whether somebody is a Mashpee resident.
John, you had a question?
Yeah, Mr. Gibbons, so, again, the reason you have to do that is because only one residence, one of your properties can be filed for the exemption,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
Okay, so just, the other question I have is, there's part-time residents and/or rentals on the category on 15 spreadsheets we have.
Yeah.
So, looking at that, is there a way to break out, or do we know short-term weekly rentals as compared to,
No,
Year-round? No?
okay.
I have no data on that. All I know is that the people I talk to, that short-term rentals are becoming a lot more popular for many different reasons. If you're a landlord, you rent year-round, you can get a call 365 days from a tenant. If you do a short-term rental, you get your money up front, and maybe you rent your property 50, 60 days a year at an inflated price, and you get almost the same amount of money or more money. Which is better for a landlord? The short-term rental.
So with that being said, is there a way for us to accumulate that information? With the software, over time, is there a way for us to find out
Not really. You could hire a private detective and go online and spend hours, looking at websites and see, which properties are being rented, but that's not in my purview.
I have a follow-up.
Ms.
So
Colombo?
I know I asked the question before, and I ended up going on to the census and then to Data Cape Cod, and I think our year-round rentals are just under 10%. So that data is available to us. So if we look at the census, I think it was a tiny bit higher than that. I thought it was closer to 12 or 13%, but Data Cape Cod shows it from the census at about 10%. That's residential renters who are here year-round.
All I know is that a lot of properties, are not being available for long-term rental for a year, for a year lease.
Right.
And what happened was, due to the appreciating real estate market, a lot of those owners who were renting sold. They cashed out. And now they're being sold either to someone who's moving in year-round, or they're going on a short-term rental list. That's what I see.
Which is further hurting the rental market.
Absolutely. And you have 2 mobile home parks here that would be affected.
How will they be affected?
their rentals?
Their rentals?
Their rent would go up.
Their rent would go up.
Or could.
That's right.
To John's point that you have to vet and make sure that people are only signing up once for the exemption. When you upload the information into the software, doesn't the software red flag multiple indexes?
No.
It does not. But you would be able to do a search as you enter
No,
the
we
new
can do,
applicants.
we do the search when we, if you applied, okay? If you applied, we put your name in. We see what comes up for your properties. And we can only give it to you once.
Right.
But I'll say
It
the
just
people in
sound-
Mashpee were very good. I mean, we only had maybe one person that tried to, put in for 2 out of the whole, out of
So far.
2,300 people.
So far.
Joe, how does that work on a trust?
I did ask that.
Carol asked.
Most of the people that applied on a trust, if they're a trustee of their trust, in most cases, they qualify. So most of the people that applied that were a trustee of their own trust qualified.
But only one property.
Yes, one property. You know, we had some complicated cases where, you know, you have husband and wife filing joint taxes and them trying to get two, there are loopholes, but we did a good job vetting them. Ed O'Neill, the consultant, and myself, and Lisa, when she was here, reviewed all the applications, the three of us, reviewed every application. And we had no Mashpee people reviewing the first time. We're all outsiders.
Mr. Manager?
It's my understanding that Provincetown does this.
Yes.
There was a former selectman who used to enjoy the pros and cons of evaluating the situation or the final analysis of these types of issues. I guess my question is, what, if anything, did you discover the pros and cons to be from Provincetown or any other community that has implemented this?
I'll give you the positives first, and I'd like to thank the town manager and everyone else, the other departments that helped us. One of the most important things, when I went to the Barnstable County Assessors meeting, and I spoke with folks from Provincetown, Wellfleet, Barnstable, that have enacted this, and the Wellfleet assessor got up and said, don't do what we did. And Mashpee did the opposite. We did it the right way. We funded, whether you pass it or not, we did it the right way. We funded the bridge, the camera bridge for the software. That's all set and ready to go, whether we, adopt it or not, okay? We took the year prior and we vetted the applications. That's been done. The town was supportive. We brought in a very part-time consultant to help out, and that was very helpful. So we have done it the right way, number one, to start. The other towns that I have spoken with, Barnstable, they said you have to stay on top of this. You have to, on a daily, weekly basis, address this. You can't leave it to 6 months or the last year in the 5-year revetting. You need to stay on top of this and make it a part of everyday life in the assessing world. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but.
And P-Town specifically?
Well, P-Town went with a expanded, they're the only community in the Commonwealth that went with an expanded residential exemption, which gives a residential exemption not only to the domicilaries, but it gives a residential exemption to properties that are rented on a year-round basis. But that exemption of $1,500 and something, I have it here, goes to the landlord, not to the tenant, because the assessors and the town have no relationship really with the tenant. So it is used as an incentive for a Provincetown land property owner to rent to a year-round person. And that's $1,500. This year it was $1,500. It's $1,636 in Provincetown for fiscal '23. But their residential exemption is also, upwards of $1,600.
Okay, and I'm sorry, what percentage were they at, P-Town?
I have that. Hold on, let's see. They are 25%. And I will say, the 16 communities that have adopted the residential exemption, you have to keep in mind, when you look at the percentages, most of those communities did not start at that percentage. Malden started at 5%. Other communities started at 10, and they've gone up over time. They haven't started up at 35 or even, 25.
And in our meeting, you explained to us this whole process and the intricacies. In that meeting, correct me if I'm wrong, you said the way that DOR understands that this, to use it to its full advantage, the numbers are more like 60-40?
Yeah,
But they only allow for 35?
Well, no. What I was saying is that the DOR says that if a town is going to consider the residential exemption, okay, it should have a minimum of 60% non-domiciliary properties. That would be Boston, Nantucket, places like that. We're 45, 55, the opposite way, and heading south. Because each year, we're having more and more year-round people living here.
Can I?
I think
sure.
Michaela had
Oh,
a
okay.
question first.
Okay. I was going to ask how that compares with Barnstable, for example, or less Wellfleet, no, Barnstable.
As far as
Is
their
it similar?
percentage,
Yes.
the percentage of, on the RX or their percentage of owner occupancy?
I think you were talking about our owner occupants.
Yeah,
as
I
opposed to
don't have
residential, so I was
detail, I don't
curious.
have current detail
Okay.
on other towns. As far as, I have their percentage and what they get for the RX, but I don't know offhand.
What is Barnstable's RX?
Barnstable is 20%.
20%.
And they've had it since '06. And they're right now having a problem over there with their revetting.
Joe,
Because they're behind.
so I'm going back to this year-round rental.
Yeah.
I mean, you brought it up as far as Provincetown. So Provincetown somehow got the information of year-round rentals. So how do they do it? Because if they can do it, I'm assuming we can do it. So,
Well, I don't know if they got the percentage, but maybe they had a committee, maybe they, I don't know how they answered that particular question. But I think if I know what I know about Provincetown, it seems to be a resort area that almost closes shop in the winter.
yeah, and, well, the reason is, I have a hard time thinking about this with the effects that it could cause on the year-round rentals.
Yeah.
So, and just like Provincetown, if I was to be in favor of this, I would like to see the year-round rentals be included and preserved as well. Because without it, I wonder about the effects on mobile homes, year-round rentals.
Yeah.
And there's got to be a way for us, if we don't have the information now, which obviously is the case, there's got to be a way for us to get it. And it might be, maybe it's next year's assessment, I don't know, but we should be able to capture that information.
But that process is done through the expanded RX, correct?
Yes.
The
As I
rental,
understand
an expanded RX?
If
To
they're
John's
year-round
point.
rental or weekly rental.
Year-round rental would qualify for the expanded RX in P-Town.
It incentivizes year-round rentals,
What?
correct? It incentivizes year-round rentals.
Yes, it does.
Correct?
Yes.
That's what I'm saying, but right now, they're not,
That's not on this.
they're not broken apart. So that's what I'm saying, we don't have the information breaking up. From weekly rentals and year-round rentals, they're all in one pool. So we can't break them apart right now.
But you can't get the expanded RX without implementing an RX, correct?
I believe so, but the expanded RX was a home rule petition that Provincetown got, which is a 1 to 2 year process with your state legislature, with the state legislature. It's not something you can just, easily do. It takes a year to 2 years to get something like that passed.
Understood.
I was going to mention if we could get a ballpark again by looking at the 2020 census, which gives us a ballpark of how many year-round rentals we have.
The only issue I see with that is that I question the 2020 census because the information was gathered in 2019, which we've all experienced the effects of COVID and year-round rentals increasing because COVID taught us that people can work remotely. And so there's been an uptick in year-round residency. I think that's what's affecting our waters. The ponds and things don't have that time to heal. So, I think that's why we're seeing a lot of what we're seeing with regards to increased assessments, home sales. There's not anything out there for renters. So with that, if the board doesn't have any more questions in this initial round, I'd like to open it up to public comment as part of the hearing.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Should I
Joe.
stay here because some of the,
If you could take a seat in the back and just let folks
Okay.
come up, and if we need you, we'll call you back. Don't go too far. So I'll call you up. Donna Fuller, if you'd come up first. Yes, you're first on the list.
I'm Donna Fuller. I live on Mashpee Neck Road, and we are very concerned about the residential exemption. We've been paying taxes in Mashpee since 1972, and we became full-time residents several years ago after retiring. We recently put our house in an irrevocable trust and have our children as the trustees. But in the trust, it states that we have the right to reside there, and in addition, are responsible to pay all taxes and all other expenses, which we do. It seems, because our house is in this irrevocable trust, that we may not qualify because our kids are the trustees, despite the fact that we personally pay the taxes and live there full-time. So this proposal could possibly increase our taxes substantially. So we're asking, please vote no, as this is extremely unfair to people who, like us, are in this situation and that live here full-time in Mashpee and pay the taxes and have been in Mashpee since 1972. In addition, several other people have stated that it's very unfair to summer residents who spend an enormous amount of money in the town and they use very little of the town sources. And they would be taxed without really having any say. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you'll consider this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fuller. Alana Doyle?
Hi, David. I am very impartial to this conversation. I just wanted to clarify something about the short-term rentals. I do believe the town collects taxes on short-term rentals, so I would assume that there is a list of those properties available already. I know that was pertinent to your discussion, so that information should already be available to the town.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Alana.
Lisa Fry?
Good evening. Lisa Fry, 40 Autumn Drive. There's been a lot of talk about the residential exemption for a long time, so I'm trying to sort things through myself and trying to stick with facts and try to take out all the emotional, political pieces. And a lot of the ideas that I jotted down have already been mentioned tonight. The tax levy will be the tax levy. The pie is the same pie. So the town will not benefit from a penny more or penny less. The exemption isn't going to mean that you're taking any less money. You're collecting the same amount of money, but it's being shifted to a different population. The people who are non-year-round residents, they're still taxpayers, and they don't get to vote. They don't get to weigh in on how the town that we spend our money. So that's already happening, and some people say, well, they accept certain things because when they bought here, they should know, and that's true. But now we want to shift it. Now we want to shift it. And one of the most troubling things that I've heard, people's argument is, well, they can afford it. I will benefit based on the criteria from the residential exemption. But it just really, I find that disturbing. I find it divisive that people decide who they can afford it and who need assistance. And I just think it should be fair to everybody. If we use the same logic, then we may start saying for excise tax, if you own a Mercedes or a BMW or an Audi or some luxury vehicle, that instead of everybody paying the $25 per thousand on your excise tax, that maybe you should pay $35. And if I have a Ford or a Chevy or, you know, something considered less luxurious, that I should pay less. I also don't think I should go to Dunkin' Donuts and get a free cup of coffee if the car behind me is actually the one paying for it. So these are kind of some of the things that just don't really sit right or seem fair. And I know some people have said, fair, who cares? I just feel like the role of the selectmen is to look out for all the taxpayers and not just the ones who vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Frank.
Thank you, Lisa.
Terry Cook?
Terry Cook, 6 Angelo's Way. I am another person that has lived here a long time. I would be a person that would benefit from a residential exemption. I, too, don't think it's fair to be taxing them at a different rate just because they choose to vacation here, spend money here, and whatnot. I'm also very concerned about the unintended consequences of this residential tax exemption. People will choose to not build here in Mashpee. We won't have the new growth. People such as my own husband, who's an electrical contractor in town, it's going to affect a lot of our local businesses, not only by building a home, but also with people that frequent all of our businesses in town. And I do believe, again, that it's almost it's a taxation without a representation. I'm also extremely concerned that our commercial properties will maintain being taxed at the natural tax rate, which is going to be quite a bit lower than what the rest of us would be paying for a tax rate. For instance, the $6.94 that was suggested, as opposed to the $7.07, the $7.22, depending on what percentage you folks would adopt. I just think a lot of assumptions are being made about the folks that are non-domiciliary, I think I pronounced that right, people in their houses that, you know, it may be that it was just a family cottage that someone comes down and vacations in for 5 or 6 weeks a year. I also believe very strongly that our economy in this town depends a lot on these part-time taxpayers to our town. So I hope you're considering all of the unintended consequences if you do bring in this residential tax exemption. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.
Marge Hecht?
Good evening, everyone. Marjorie Hecht, Hoopole Road.
Good evening.
First, speaking as someone who will benefit from the proposed tax exemption, I urge Select Board members to support it. The tax exemption is an immediate way to make Mashpee's housing more affordable for year-round residents, especially for retired people on a modest income like myself. Second homeowners may say that this isn't fair, and others, as we heard. But what is fair? Is it fair to residents in modest homes and to those who can't even afford any home here that so many large, expensive second homes have driven up housing prices and rents here and sent the cost of repair work, services, and all locally purchased commodities sky high? This is designed as a progressive tax, but I realize that there may be a few people with small summer cottages for whom this will be a burden. Perhaps an exemption with an income provision could be considered to remedy this. 16 communities in Mashpee have successfully adopted this tax exemption plan, including Barnstable and other towns on the Cape. Mashpee could join them by adopting the tax exemption as a step toward making housing here more affordable. No building needed, no weight, no environmental footprint, just an immediate way to make housing more affordable for the year-round residents who elect this Select Board. This is an important point. The full-time residents of Mashpee depend on the Select Board to make decisions on our behalf, not on behalf of a minority of part-time residents who vote elsewhere.
Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Arden Russell.
Good evening, Arden Russell, Sturgis Lane. I think it's evident to everybody that Cape Cod has an affordable housing crisis. There's not enough housing supply of any type at moderate price levels to adequately provide housing for our residents, for our workforce. In addition, the cost of living for those who are fortunate to already own a home here is rapidly increasing. We must tackle both of these problems simultaneously. One strategy the Select Board can adopt to soften the blow of ever-increasing cost of living for low and moderate income homeowners in Mashpee is to adopt a residential exemption. That is up for a vote tonight. A residential exemption is designed to provide a proportionately greater benefit to lower valued homes. Now is an especially critical time to adopt this measure, as we shortly will begin to feel the cost associated with wastewater implementation in our tax bills. And I just want to say a little something about renters, since it's been discussed so much tonight. As we know, there are very few year-round rentals in Mashpee. It's part of the affordable housing crisis that we have. And as everybody has mentioned, the few that we have been increasingly shifting to short-term rentals. Many of the affordable rentals do not pay real estate taxes. Nonprofits, housing authorities don't pay real estate taxes, so they're not going to be affected by this. Mashpee's leaders cannot continue to talk about the affordable housing problem and yet ignore the solutions. I urge the Select Board to vote in favor of the residential exemption. We can do hard things.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. Lynn Barbie.
Lynn Barbie, Surf Drive. I'm going to be echoing what several of the previous speakers have said about people who are living on fixed incomes in modest homes. And I just want to say that I'm not speaking on behalf of the committee, but I serve on the Human Services Committee, and our Human Services Director is spending a lot of her time doing fuel assistance for our residents. So when there are a lot of our residents who can't pay for the rising cost of fuel, and we just learned that Eversource and they're going to be increasing those. I think anything that can help those folks who are struggling economically and who do own their homes, that we should do whatever we can to support them, because they do have a different economic reality than people who own a second home. not to say they're better or worse, but they have a different economic reality. And there are a lot of people in this town who are struggling economically, and we hear about it in Human Services. So I would like you all to consider to vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. Was there anyone else that wanted to come forward and, yes, sir, please come forward and, that's fine, that's the end of the list. Please state your name for the record.
Yep, Mike Cahill,
Name
live
and
over in
address.
Papaneset on Elliott Road. My grandfather has been coming down here back since the 1950s with my father and his two brothers and sister. I started coming down when I was born in the 80s with my two sisters, and now I have 3 daughters, and we come down, but just in the summertime. So I'm one of the people who does not live here year-round. I drove an hour here for this meeting because it matters a lot to me. Like I said, I'm now the owner of our family home down here. We love coming down here in the summertime. When I was a kid, we spent summers here every year. And now that I have kids, we try to do that as well. We started renting our home out in 2017 to afford it because we just continue to use it the whole summer and keep the house. So, and I think it was 2019 or 18, the town implemented a tax on short-term rentals, which we happily pay. I think total it's like 14.5% or something like that on the income. Not all just to Mashpee, a lot of it goes to the state as a hotel tax. And we abide by those rules. We don't try to skirt around it. We're happy to pay it because we love it down here and we want to see the community continue to be the community that we grew up with. As you may notice, I think I'm the first person to get up and say that I don't live here year-round, and the reason a lot of those people aren't here to voice their concerns is because they don't live here, and they're not necessarily able to drive down to voice their concerns. And, you know, to me, I've heard it mentioned, oh, you know, these people can afford it, they have a second home. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not the case for everybody. The people that I live next to and around in Pompanesett, a lot of them are people who have inherited homes that have been passed down for generations. They love it. They don't want to not be able to afford it. But yeah, they come down in the summertime. It doesn't make them, I think the stereotype of these people is that they're super rich and that, yeah, they can afford it and too bad. Well, that's not true. A lot of these people love it here. They want to be able to come down here. A lot of them are resorting to renting out so they can keep their family homes and don't want to lose it. And so, and yeah, look, to me, I mean, taxation without representation was something that caused the Tea Party. Like, it sounds pretty un-American to me. And it's easy to say, like, whatever, like, they don't live here so they can't vote. They pay taxes here. They love this community. They pay for movies and restaurants, and, you know, they love to spend time on the same beach that everyone here that lives here does, too. Doesn't make them any less, doesn't make them matter less. So my request is that you consider the many police officers and roofers and people who are blue-collar workers who maybe inherited family homes down here and want to continue that. And many of them are resorting to renting it out to be able to keep it. And now they're going to have to pay an additional tax in addition to the tax that they're paying to rent it out, like myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ma'am, if you'd come forward, and then I'll take you, sir. Please state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, my name is Diane Phillips. I live on Whaler Road. I live on a Shumet Pond. I'm surrounded by wonderful people that are seasonal visitors. My neighbor next door and a few others can barely afford their home. They were in their families for years. My fear is they will vacate. The homes will be filled with year-round residents. We'll just increase our tax burden with children in the school systems. And the reason why some of them are scared to even stay there right now is the water quality on the ponds that is dying, and this will only increase that problem by filling those homes that they vacate with year-round residents. We don't have the infrastructure to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sir?
Hi, I'm Larry Palmer, 63 Waterway. I'm another person who is a part-time, I'm not even a part-time resident yet, but I will be soon. We've been coming to Mashpee for 16 years. we could only afford to stay here for a week every summer, but we loved it. We've been coming since our kids were 2. They grew up here. They learned to ride their bikes here. They learned to body surf at the beach. All the kids' things do. And we loved it here. And so this is where we want to retire. And so when it came time for us to get close, I'm 65. My kids are I've got 2 kids going into college next year. But if I can work till 70, that's my hope, and we will move here. So we started building a house here. It's not done yet, it's close to done, but we'll be part-time residents for a little while because I'd love to move here today, but I can't afford to leave my job. I had to take time off from work to get down here to this meeting. It was it's a long drive, it's difficult to do. So I guess my point is, people who, you think of sort of people with second homes as somebody who can afford to take up the slack and pay the extra money, but, we're struggling too. These houses, building a house was a lot more expensive than we thought. Interest rates have gone up like crazy. Costs went up like crazy. We put a lot of money into the local economy. We hired a lot of local workers. And then on a more practical point, the kind of things that I'm a little concerned about the fact that the tax is revenue neutral, but there's going to be an additional cost to administer it, which means that there's going to be less money left over for other things than there is today, or else taxes are going to have to go up to make up that shortfall. In addition, human nature is human nature. People fudge on stuff like residency, so you're going to have to stay after that. People are going to claim their, domicile is something else. And so now you're going to have, neighbor against neighbor, people spying out the windows to count how many days there's a car in the driveway. That's not the kind of community that I really would like to live in. And, if Mashpee had this, I think it would have been a big red flag to us when we built a house. I don't know that we would have, honestly. I think there's too much divisiveness. There's too much divisiveness in America now, dividing people into groups and pitting them against each other. And I'd really like to just say, look, we're all in this together. Times are hard for everybody. We're all working together. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well
Thank
said.
you.
Dave, may I?
Yes.
Heard a lot of stuff tonight about what's going on. I've been a part-time resident and a full, Mike Richardson, 47 Slice Way. Sorry, I know who I was. I thought you all did. But at the end of the day, I've been a part-time resident down here, so I had a home here and a home someplace else. Now I'm a full-time resident down here. My behavior hasn't changed. I participate in the town. I go out in the town. We've spent money in the town. And a lot of people I know, both full-time and part-time, we all work together in this town. We all try to help each other out. We spend a lot of money in this town, and we love the town. I don't think it's fair to put people against each other. You're putting neighbor against neighbor. I could have a neighbor full-time next to a part-time neighbor. Next thing you know, they're not talking to each other because the tax rate's been changed. So I think the bottom line is that, yes, towns have done it, and they're talking about all the towns that have successfully done it, 15 out of almost 400. So it doesn't sound to me like it's a big thing that everybody really wants to do. There's a lot of things everybody can do in this room and every place else to help everybody out down here. We all try to help each other out. We can do more to help each other out, but I don't think changing the tax rate to make one person pay more or one person pay less is the answer. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Mary Wagon.
Hi, Mary Wagon, 35 Ashumet Road. Excuse me. So I'm here tonight to encourage you to pass the residential tax exemption. The reason being is that we have an affordable housing crisis. We have a moderate housing crisis. We have a workforce crisis in town and on the Cape. One of the factors causing this housing crisis is that for moderate and low-income households is that 30% of our housing stock per data Cape Cod, the U.S. Census and the American Community Surveys, 30% of our housing stock is used only seasonally, and that puts a huge pressure on our housing market. There's other barriers, the environmental sensitivity of our town, the fact that we have protective zoning. But if you look at any market, whatever it is, any industry, and you put on a 30% burden, you're going to see prices going up. With this residential tax exemption, you're shifting that burden and trying to mitigate that. Our housing production plan, which was updated and approved in 2015, states that one of the barriers to affordable living here in town is property taxes, especially for low-income households and households that are on a fixed income. Saying that 30% of our housing is only seasonally used is not trying to villainize anybody. That's what it is. That's what it is. Professional planners and consultants will come in and tell you that's a housing burden. We're not going to be able to solve our affordable housing and workforce problem here in town by building every unit that we need. We're not going to be able to do that by subsidizing every unit that we need. Let's say we need 500 more affordable units in town to fix that problem. We'll just multiply that by $250,000, which is a significant subsidy that is typical for affordable units. So it's a tool in the toolbox. I do encourage you not to go to the full 35%. For goodness sakes, don't do that. But I think that we should give it a try. And I really like that that idea about having the year-round rental units get the same type of abatement. I know it sounds like we have to spend about 2 years to get that online, but I would aggressively go forward with that in a modest percentage for the residential tax exemption. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Werrigan. Yes, sir. Please state your name and address for the audience.
Andrew Gottlieb, 119 Pickerel Cove. Nice to meet you all. So I've heard each and every one of you over the years say you want to do something to help the full-time residents of the town be able to afford to stay here, raise their kids, build their businesses, participate in the economy. Time after time after time, ideas are brought forward, and we have collectively as a community said, no. This is, frankly, the last good opportunity, realistically, that's within your control to do something that's in the financial best interest of the people that are struggling to live and work here on a full-time basis. And I would encourage you to adopt even a modest residential exemption tonight. You know, you hear a lot of talk about, you know, neighbor against neighbor and negative economic impacts. Barnstable's done it, Wellfleet's done it, Truro's done it, Provincetown's done it. None of those communities are unlivable hellscapes in which people are at war with one another, nor are they not failing to thrive economically. It's been done by towns, frankly, that have lesser administrative capacity and talent than the town of Mashpee. This can be done, but you have to make the political decision on whether you want to invest in the people of the town or not. A lot has been said to you about reasons not to do this that haven't focused on the impact on the individuals. So if you look at your 10% number, only 4% of the properties would pay more than $300 in additional taxes, and those properties would be valued in excess of $2 million. I have a hard time accepting that as a burdensome notion. 81% would pay less than a $100 increase, whereas the majority of homes that qualify would gain advantage of more than $350. That's a meaningful amount of money for people who have lower valued properties in this town and are struggling to make ends meet. Much of the resistance you've heard has come down, frankly, in my estimation, to administrative convenience. Yeah, it's different, takes some more work, but it's doable. Other towns have done it. And in particular, I think the budgetary impacts that have been painted have been well overstated. The fact of the matter is that one solution to avoid running a deficit and overlay is simply transfer free cash into your overlay reserve. You started out the year prior to October town meeting with over $13 million in free cash. Sure, you spent a little bit of it, and there are plans that people have for that money. But frankly, what's a better use of the money that's been collected from the taxpayers of Mashpee to provide tax relief to the people of Mashpee? And if it doesn't get taken and used in the year in which you transfer it, guess what? It goes back to free cash, and you can use it how you originally intended in the first place. There are solutions out there. You haven't been offered them, and that's a shame. And I think it puts you in a disadvantaged position as you struggle with this difficult issue. So I would encourage you to start, take the 10% number that was recommended to you as a cap, start and see how it goes. Thank you. Good to see you all.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir. And then Tom. Please state your name and address for the
My name is Nick Rucky, and my Mashpee address is 8 Summersea Road. I wrote to the board a letter expressing my displeasure with the possible enactment of the RX. I'm just here now to say that don't lose track of the fact that, as was stated earlier, the pie will only see the same amount of pie. There'll be no additional funds generated today by this enactment. Taxpayers are in fact paying the town. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a part-time resident. So I ask again that this not be passed on to the seasonal resident. Do something with industrial and commercial. It's a growing industry. Consider that, please, and do not pass it on to the seasonal residents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Mr. Fidala?
I'm here to support my buddy Andy Gottlieb. This is one of the things we agree on totally. I mean, Mashpee, I'm just shocked that the average house in Mashpee is $700,000 or whatever. My house is less than half of that, and I'm on a fixed income. And I don't get to do the fancy memories of my childhood playing on the beach because my family could never afford it. I'm on a fixed income. I can barely afford my bills now. I mean, and you're talking about energy and the rest going up. And I'm better off than most people that live in Mashpee. I live in a neighborhood of houses that were built by, you know, they're little capes that were built for people in the working class. I'm all builders and plumbers and a lot of single divorced or widowed women with kids in the neighborhood. And we're the kind of people that can't afford a second house, which by definition means you're rich, okay? We're not rich, and we need help, and all those people need help. And I would remind you that at the spring town meeting, the voters overwhelmingly voted to spend $25,000 in support of the, let's see, software consultants. Wait a second, wrong side of the page here. Let's see here. Yeah, printing, mailing, consultant fees, software updates, et cetera. I mean, the town meeting already voted essentially that they want you to do this. So I think you ought to listen to your voters and take care of your voters, because we don't have the option of going to Florida for the winter in our second home, or coming down here for the summer and going back to our home in whatever expensive suburb of Boston or New York to live in. That's why the income tax form is what you use. I mean, that's your real address. Nobody's going to be able to lie to you about that, because IRS is not allowing you to put in two different income tax forms under different addresses. It's just a no-brainer. We've got an affordability problem. We keep talking about it. As was said, this is something we can do for all of the working people in town and the people that are having trouble affording to live here or can't even live here. I do think that you should look into the rental idea because obviously people that rent are in a position, well, not all of them, but are in a position they can't even afford to have a house in the first place. And it's only getting worse for them. So in any case, what is that? Is that a limit? Should I shut up now? In any case, I'd strongly urge you to listen to your voters from spring town meeting and to listen to all the talk you've said about supporting affordable housing and working people and all the rest, and vote in favor of this residential exemption. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fratello.
And I'll be voting tomorrow at the Water District in favor of it.
Anyone else?
Can you reclaim time if you left it on the board?
I don't know that any of us was keeping track of that.
I had 30 seconds of it. I just one thing I forgot to say.
You're welcome to come back
So
up.
I just want to say that
Please come to the mic so the audience at home can
the
appreciate it.
cost of living issue is an issue that's gone across the country. It's not just local to Mashpee. Cost of copper, cost of steel, cost of food, cost of gas, cost of homes. That's not because people have a second home here. That's something that would affect you no matter where you live. So the fact that people are saying, oh, like these people are having second homes here is causing me not to be able to afford to buy groceries or buy gas, that has nothing to do with that. Nothing.
Nobody said that.
Thank you. Alana?
I know you guys are probably getting sick of me at this point, but thanks, John, I see that. After hearing everyone speak tonight, I have actually formed an opinion and marked this day in history. The 5 of you know me pretty well. This might be the only time I say these words, but I actually agree with Mary and Andy. I think that this is probably a good idea. I think that this is a good idea. You know, you hear people saying tonight, oh no, the house next to me might have kids in the school. Oh my God, that hurt my heart. But also, you also hear the comparisons, you know, oh, I like to go to the beach. I like not having neighbors. Well, you know what? Not too long ago, I hated my life because I couldn't find a viable way to stay in the place that I've lived my whole life, that my parents have lived their whole life, and generations back. And I just think it's two totally different scenarios that aren't easily comparable. So thank you, guys.
Thank you. After you, Lisa, I'm going to take this gentleman's
Because I do want to understand.
comment, and I think he looked like the last one with his hands raised as a new speaker. Go ahead.
I'm just trying to understand how a decrease in my tax and an increase on somebody else's tax creates more affordable housing.
May I address that?
Sure.
Mary Wagon. So just very simply, housing is affordable to you if you don't spend more than 30% of your income, okay? So you could own a very expensive home, but be on a fixed income because you're now retired, and your housing wouldn't be affordable, right? The government sets the definition of affordable housing that your household income is no more than 30%, and they target their programs on households that make 80% of area median income or less. If you pay more than 30% of your income, you have a housing cost burden. And part of that housing cost burden calculation includes your property taxes.
What was the average increase that he said earlier? I forget what he said. The average increase.
So I
100 what?
$196.
So if we don't do anything, that's what's going to increase everyone's cost this year on average?
The average.
We need folks at the mic.
So
Yeah, folks at home can't hear the question, so.
the question was, what would the average increase be on an average homeowner in Mashpee? And the assessor said a little over $100 a year. How much?
196.
109, so almost $200 a year in property taxes. So for me, I'm eligible for this. I'm one of the 2,100 people, plus or minus, that have already been set as being eligible. It would be about an $800 a year relief, tax relief for me. So considering my income, that would be significant. Does that answer your question, Liz? No, it's affordable living. It's affordable living. You're right. It doesn't go on the inventory.
Thank you for your assistance. Yes, sir.
Sanjeev Agrawal, 205 Uncle Percy's Road. So I think pandemic has changed a lot on how you live here, and domicile doesn't necessarily. I have a domicile in Boston because I work there 1 day a week, and my company requires me to do that. I live here 4 days or 5 days or 6 days a week because I can, and I enjoy living here. So we shouldn't bring that domicile and taxation related necessarily to where to grant the RX unnecessarily as a single form, because I need to do that because of work and other things, but I live only 1 day there and 6 days here. So I would sort of say that you vote against it because it provides flexibility to me and I enjoy it. I don't need to change my domicile and everything else I do just because of that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So at this time, that's all the questions I see from the public.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Having a first and second, any discussion on closing the public hearing? A roll call vote. Carol?
Yes.
Yes.
John? Tom?
To close.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That closes the public hearing. I'll take another round of questions from the board. Anyone have discussion?
I do. So I know I and several of the people, many people in this room attended the Housing to Protect Cape Cod kickoff a couple weeks ago. And I think, not that we didn't know it anyway, but it really pointed out that housing in Cape Cod and the affordability of housing, when I say affordability, I'm talking about middle-class housing as well as housing that's classified as affordable. Housing that people can live in order to work here, regardless of their profession. It's one of the largest, outside of the water, I think it's the greatest crisis we face. One of the things that almost everybody there who spoke encouraged us to do was to think outside the box, that we can't build housing quickly enough to satisfy the need. I would suggest that by bringing in an exemption and starting with a lower exemption, it helps us to start thinking outside the box. Even at 10%, a reduction would be about $435 at a home between $200,000 and $300,000. And the cost, additional cost to someone without the exemption only goes up to about $30, and that's if we have 5,000 people applying. So I think when you look at the benefit to people who are really struggling, who want to live here, who deserve to live here and work here, the people who are taking care of us if we go to the hospital, they're doing physical therapy, they're working in our schools. I think that we should consider this, strongly consider it.
Tom, any question, discussion?
Well, sometimes I think that the cost of living is much higher on Cape Cod than it is in other locations. The cost of housing costs more because there are fewer homes, and there are a lot of people that want to live in Mashpee. Mashpee all of a sudden became the hot spot, and it's the place everybody wants to be. It's just come over the bridge, and you're in a better place you couldn't be in, as far as I'm concerned. I think it's not just about housing. I think it's about affordability. I think it's about job creation. Without jobs, nobody's buying anything. in a commute to Boston where you have to have the ability to stay overnight at the expense of your employer, that's one thing. But I think we need to create more jobs, better paying jobs, and year-round jobs. The construction industry is booming. I know that a lot of contractors are doing extremely well. Other than that, there's not a lot of industry down here. But I think that we need to be concentrating on that. And the cost of housing is just astronomical. People are waiting in line to buy homes. As soon as the property goes on the market, it's selling. And we all know this. A lot of them are selling beyond the asking price. The economy's driving what's happening in housing. So, you know, what we also need to do is, as a town, and I've been on the planning board, I think we need to look at zoning. We need to allow for cluster developments. You're allowed to use smaller lot sizes. We need to allow for more construction, a little denser community, but it will add to the number of houses that we have. Affordable housing, absolutely. I mean, if we have the money and the funds are available, I think we have 2 or 3 projects that are waiting to get going. They're not single-family homes, but they're multiple units. And I'm not quite certain as to the design of them. It's been almost so long that we've been waiting to get the shovel in the ground, and we are waiting with at least 2 projects right now ready to go. So it's getting to the point it's very, very close. But I think there's more to it. But I think jobs, and let's face it, if some people would like to own home, but the reality is, unless they get a job that pays better, they're not going to make it. It'll make life miserable, just trying to keep the mortgage and the house over your head. I mean, I won't be living here. I'll guarantee you. And when I leave here, when I stop, I'm 71 years old now. When I'm done, I'm done. I'm out of here. I can't afford it without living. I mean, I took this last year off because of health and repairs. I will not be here. And I know that for a fact. The dollars don't go as far here as they do on the other side of the bridge. So, I mean, just because you have a house doesn't mean you're going to be here forever. And trust me, it's happening to me right now as I speak. And until everything changes, it's not just one aspect of this. It's the whole ball together. You have to look at it overall. But we'll do the best we can. Buy when interest rates are low, get a good job, work 2 jobs. I'm self-employed. I work, you know, sometimes 60, 80 hours a week. I'm fortunate I'd be able to do that. So, but that's where I stand. I don't think it's easy. And I don't know that just handing houses or having a bid on a house or a raffle on a house is the way to go. I think we need to create jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Carol?
I have always had mixed emotions about this. And I have seen that the figures, and I've sat down with the teams and gone through the numbers. And a lot of people didn't understand how this was going to work, to come in and bring their income tax, to be vetted, to be certified. If we start this at a low percentage rate of the 5% to start, to give Mr. Gibbons and his department a year to get it up and running, but it's also going to give the non-resident an increase of taxes of not more than $200. It's $6, $25. On an average $700,000 home, $45 would be your increase on a 5% exemption. I'm not really for the exemption. I don't like it. I've never liked it. When we brought it before the voters in 2014, We all said no, except one. Nobody in the audience liked it either. So if we do go forward with this, I would say, I would be okay with the 5%, but I really don't like doing this,
John?
for many other reasons.
Wow. So I as well was at the housing conference, and actually I attended there was additional breakout groups. So one of the things they did talk about is, I agree with you, Michaela, it's not one, there's no one answer. And I know that the silver bullet came up as the one answer, and there's probably maybe 10, 20 answers to try to solve housing that's affordable. And allowing people to, stay in their houses if they want to age in place, and giving them the resources to do so. One of the other things that they did mention was deed restrictions on, to enforce year-round renters and/or ownership of those houses, to prevent, at the same time, realizing that those weekly renters pay us considerable amount of taxes on top of which we use to help, run the town. So, we're encouraging one thing, but I think it's the right thing. It's done by, in Colorado, in Vail. And it was a similar community, although it's not surrounded by, as they called it, surrounded by mountains and instead of water. But they had very similar layout as far as population and housing. So I do think we need to do a lot of little things to help the residents. I really have a tough time with I really want to include
Rentals.
the rentals
Year-round.
as far as the year-round rentals, and specifically the mobile homes, which I'm guessing they're not, high-income earners if they're living in a mobile home. That, it's a serious concern. If, obviously, the 35%, I think it's absurd. And we have, as Andy Gottlieb, spoke today, he's presented this for years and years, the 7.5 years I've been on the board. We heard this every year that I was on this board. But this is the first year we've actually got numbers, because we did this, we purchased the software, we have some numbers. To be honest with you, they're not close to perfect yet. I would like to have something close to perfect, and what I mean by that is, not knowing the year-round and the weekly renters, and we're looping them together, so they are all gonna feel the impact of an increase. That's tough for me to, Joe, we don't have an answer for that. I'm assuming we can get an answer, but I'm assuming that wouldn't be till next year. My other comment is, if we do something now, or if we don't do something, this can be revisited. So say, for example, we did do a 5% this year. Next year, we can decide to either not do it, go to 10%, we can do whatever we want. Is that correct?
Yes, you can do whatever you want anytime. Every year, it's a different snapshot, every year.
So, no matter what we decide to, do here as far as a vote, Mr. Chair, I would respectfully request that we find a way to break out year-round rentals from weekly rentals in some way. I don't care if it's, town meeting, I don't care. It has to be on I don't know. I don't know how we have to do that, but I think we have to do it.
I don't know the number off the top of my head, but we should be able to recover that number this morning, or tomorrow morning, I should say, through health.
You mean,
Board of Health, has to inspect the short-term rentals, and
And
to
year-round.
Alana's point, we tax them, so the
Yes.
numbers should be achievable.
the ones that are reporting?
There will be some that
Well,
slip through the cracks.
yes.
I get it, I'm just, I mean, I really think we should have, you know as well as I do, there's ones that are not reporting. So, that being said, I guess we can back out the ones that are reporting, and if we're left with, everyone left is weekly rentals, so we just can we give them the credit as well? That are year-round renters?
You've lost me.
So if they're a year-round renter,
Yeah.
if they rent year-round, can we go to those numbers and can we determine who's a year-round renter?
I don't know how. You can know. the
With
year-
any-
you
We
know the
have
weekly
ownership
because
of
we
the
have
house.
Conversation, but,
I'm assuming not now,
no.
Definitely not now.
not now. So we'd be looking at this next year.
Yes.
So I would love to see as
What
a
if-
goal, if we can try to figure that out for next year. Obviously, at this point, they're all looped together and we have to make a decision tonight.
Right, which
With
makes it
them all
hard
included.
because they're not included.
Right. So
Understand?
any increase is going to be realized by year-round renters, including mobile homes.
All the mobile homes renters. See, that's where they're going to hurt.
I think, if I may, I agree with what you just said. I think it's important to look at the differences. So it would look at a reduction in taxes at that lower rate. And I think if we're talking about mobile homes, they're probably at the lower rate, right?
Oh,
So
agreed.
you're looking at a $435
Right.
reduction in taxes as compared to anywhere from 35 to 88 increase in taxes for those that would conceivably most likely be passed on to renters. So we're talking about a major decrease or reduction as opposed to a smaller increase. And I'm not saying it's not important and we shouldn't do that, but the numbers, the breakdown is really different.
Agreed, but we're talking about an increase of taxes.
Right.
Right now.
Compared to everybody else on what may be the most financially challenged.
Yeah. But what I'm trying, yes, I agree completely.
That's all.
But the increase is $23 to $70 as compared to a reduction for other people who we know are homeowners at this point
Right.
of, what, 35. I'm not saying that's inconsequential. I think we should look at that. But I think it's important to keep those numbers in mind.
So, having listened to everyone, I have taken everything into consideration and feel that, there was eloquent arguments made on both sides. But for me, I have to say that, a few things kind of sway me to actually approve the RX, and understanding all the stressors that are going into affordable housing. The 65% increases in electric, food costs. I look at places like Martha's Vineyard, which they can't even hire people because the cost of living is so high. They can't offer a high enough salary for people to be able to live there. So, and that's coming to, that's being, happening here as well. Another stressor is, we have a developing industry going off in the waters. Folks often hear me talk of offshore wind. Those people that are gonna work are gonna be working 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. They're gonna move their families here. Their the spouse will end up working here as well. That's a whole nother influx of workforce that I don't think folks are anticipating. And they're gonna purchase homes while they're here. As far as the historic character of the Cape, I think, has significantly changed over the years. And we heard, various people stand up and talk about, you know, the blue-collar workers and the small modest cottages that used to be here. And Papaneset was comprised of a lot of small cottages. Now what we see is, you know, kind of large-scale houses, McMansions as sometimes they're called, you know, being developed. And, you know, it's changing the environment. We hear all the time that people are coming in and they don't want to compete for or haggle over pricing, so they're paying above market value on some of the homes. You saw the huge jump in the assessments this year as a result of that. People just coming in and throwing money down. You know, we all have heard these things. You know, and they're all stressors to the affordability of home ownership and home rentals. You know, I think one benefit, this may encourage modest home development rather than buying a McMansion, building something that's out, you know, going to strap you for cash and building something over the size of what you need. You may reconsider and build something a little more modest, which would further support the community character. So it would be a net positive, in my opinion. The other thing is that this may encourage ADUs being built. You know, if you're a resident and you're living on the property and you're able to build an accessory dwelling unit, it may incentivize people building a small detached structure as an affordable housing component on their properties. You know, and then to Tom Fadala's point, you know, I think town meeting has given a directive that they want us to entertain this and think hard and long about this, and they see value in it by paying for what they've already bought into with the software and the endorsement of hiring a consultant to properly vet this out. You know, these are some of the things. And when I think about the affordability, you know, it's the cost of living is, I think of our most challenged people, the people that are struggling the most. You know, people on very limited income and, you know, making short money. You know, the whole house has to work to pay the mortgage or rent or whatever it is. You know, those are the people I'm most concerned with. And looking at the numbers, you know, this has been painted as, you know, it's more work, it's not fair, it's, you know, it's a burden, administrative burden, and it's been painted as this big scary thing when, you know, when you look at the sheet here with the numbers highlighted, you know, to Michaela's point and Andrew's point, the numbers really, the benefit outweighs the negative in that, you know, the 208, somebody living in the most modest home on the whole sheet, and this is at the 10%, they're gonna get a benefit, they're gonna get a reduction in $435. That's a lot of money for somebody making, you know, $600-700 a week. You know, that's a huge. And, you know, the increase is only gonna go up 12% comparably to, on the other side. You know, $12 above the 196 we're at the 6.94. You know, so, I mean, and this is actually gonna be a detriment to me because you know, our family owns some property that's not developed. You know, it's been in the family for generations, and I'm gonna have to pay an increase in my taxes, but I'm willing to do that if it's gonna save somebody I know and care about. It's gonna save them $400 a year. We all have to make sacrifices for least fortunate. And, you know, our decisions should be selfless. When we make decisions, we need to do what's right. We're not making enough moves on affordable housing. You know, there is just not enough. We're nowhere near the mark on the 10% requirement. Nowhere near it. We haven't been in years, ever. And, you know, it's getting further and further away, actually, with the higher construction costs in place. So, you know, I think we should really take this into consideration. I was actually going to come in because of the shortfall overlay, the way it was explained to me, was that, you know, they kind of, because there's unknowns, they cushioned it a little bit with the 300,000. So, you know, hearing Andrew's point that, you know, there's 13 million in free cash, in the reserves, you know, I was actually asking the folks that helped put this all together to actually present the 15%, because, you know, the closer you are to the 35, the more effective it is. You know, 5% is so minimal, it's not, I mean, it's not, there's little to no benefit. The 10%, it actually would give us, you know, say 170,000, if 1,000 people come in between now and April, it would cost us, you know, roughly anywhere from 170 to 470,000. I think we can afford it with the 13 million in reserves, and it would actually, you know, 10%'s not bad, but I was actually gonna come in and advocate for, you know, a 15% approval. You know, that would essentially give people roughly, on that lowest number of the $208,000 and $300,000 property valuation, it would actually give some people like $600, over $600 in savings. And, you know, it may go up to, I don't know, $15 on the cost. You know, I see great value in that, and I don't know if anyone would like, I'm not sure how to frame the motion because it was only presented to decline or not approve. So I guess our first question is to,
What, do you want a suggestion on how to move forward?
how to frame it to the question number one, if we were to approve.
No, question number one is the shift of the tax rate. Question number two is the open space discount. Question number three is the small commercial exemption. Question number four is the residential exemption. Question number four has two parts. A, you vote whether to adopt the residential exemption. Once that's voted, you then do another motion to come up with a percentage.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion to adopt a residential exemption.
So, yeah, but wouldn't that motion to adopt a residential exception include the percentage?
No, you first have to.
No, it's a separate motion.
It's counteracting the residential, adopting the residential factor of 1, which would keep us at the 6.9.
And you can go anywhere right up to 35.
So first, we want to, are we entertaining the idea of adopting the residential exemption? That's a yes or a no? And then once we decide that, then we decide on the percentage, as I understand it. It's an incremental step, you know, and I think we would need to start with that to get to your concern of eventually adopting an expanded RX that actually incentivizes year-round rentals.
Yeah, that can't be addressed tonight.
Tonight, no.
Right.
And that one will take 2 years, which housing costs and affordability are steadily going to go up in that time. So again, that is more justification to adopting, taking some course of action tonight to help alleviate the gentrification of, you know, what we all know and love as Mashpee.
I'll make a motion to adopt a residential exemption of the average assessed single-family property.
Is there anyone willing to second that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you for that discussion. Hearing no discussion, roll call vote. Carol?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Tom?
No.
Michaela?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So the motion to adopt the residential exemption has passed. Now we have to come to an agreement on the percentage rate to accept and impose this year. As I stated, I think the greatest benefit is afforded to the closer you are to the 35%. It has been recommended not to jump to 35%, but I think, 5% is such a nominal, it'd be a wasted effort. At 5%, the 10% is not bad, but with the 13 million held in reserves, I do think that 15% is actually encourageable and gets us closer to the greatest benefit of 35. When you look at the, on the state's website, they have city and towns. This is a Division of Local Services. They have a spreadsheet on there that actually shows all the towns that have adopted it, the 16s and the different rates. There's essentially only one that is at 10%, and that would be Somerset. All the others are 35, 25, 23, so, which further explains that, we need to try to get there. I understand it's not a jump that you want to make in 1 year, but it's a greater benefit. To that point, the residential exemptions, communities choose to adopt the residential exemption often have the following characteristics. One's big cities with many non-owner occupied properties like apartment buildings, but then the other factor is resort communities with many seasonal residents. I think we have the seasonal residents, and that's one of the driving factors of us taking this approach.
Mr. Chair, I do have a sample motion that I'd ask you to look at.
Thank you.
If I may.
John?
So, I'm not excited about doing the residential exception, to be honest. That being said, I'm gonna assume that in a year's time, we can have a better hold of, a better handle on long-time residents, weekly rentals, full-time rentals, because that is a big concern, and that is why I wouldn't support a higher percentage rate, because as it is, even at 5%, even though it's not a lot of money, it's probably a lot of money to them. They're already going to experience an increase. The average is what, $190 next year per household. On top of that, you're telling me that year-round rentals, people in the trailer park are going to experience an increase in taxes over every other resident, full-time resident. That being said, is there a motion? Do you have that sheet that he mentioned about motion?
That doesn't work. That speaks to adopting the residential factor of 1.
We do. Dave?
He's the assessing department. So all you have to do is.
We're going to have him at the mic.
No, he's just.
Oh, he should be at the mic. Right. People can hear.
5%. Right. The rest of it works.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So,
He's gonna say it anyway.
John, I just have to kind of disagree with your point, only because, when you look at the chart and show the 10%, it's, 196 is the average, it's going to go up, is what we heard. That's an average, that's not the actual increase based on the valuations, that's an average. So, if that, what is going to go up on the 208 and 309, so say folks over at the trailer park that fall within that lower bracket, you know, it's gonna give the benefit of a reduction of the 435, but the taxes are gonna, the higher taxes will be 639, an increase in taxes of
It's double every 5%.
12,
For every
12%.
Every 5% it cut, it
Right,
doubles.
increase in taxes of $12. Over a course of a year, $12, I mean, comparing that to the benefit of $435 in a benefit over the course of a year, which one sounds higher? $25 over the, I mean,
Still an
at 10,
increase.
at 5%, we're arguing over $6 over an annual period.
Per thousand,
Per thousand.
$6 increase in taxes,
per thousand.
per thousand. All right.
So but we're not only doing that, though. It's the 5% compared to the 10%, which is double what 5% is. So 10% is double the 5% increase. But we're also talking about the non-residents picking up this tab increase per thousand.
Not the red. The red was.
Well, no, that's
That's with
that's
the
right, on this.
overlay.
But it matters. I mean, the numbers are real. Looking at the increases, again, it's where I'm comfortable with knowing that, you know, I look at that, we're gonna punish some full-time residents. I just,
Right.
you know, we don't have an option right now. So for me to feel comfortable, that's where I'm comfortable with, so,
On the 5%.
at the 5%.
I just want to clear one thing up. I just don't want anybody to think that we've got 13 million right now, because after.
That's not
whatever-
there.
Yeah, that's.
Well, that's all we've heard.
Well, we had, but I don't know the figure off the top of my head in terms of what was spent at October town meeting. But where are we now?
300.
All right, so just letting you know.
Thank you.
So when we're looking at the numbers, the red numbers to the right, those are total dollar values. That's not per thousand or those are the totals. The red numbers to the right that show the increase.
Correct, Joe?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. That's total dollars. That's not per thousand.
Still, I mean,
The
5%.
12
Yeah,
increase in taxes,
I get it. I just, I look at it from a walk before you run.
$12
I think if,
Yeah, but
detriment.
it's
and-
not,
and-
but that's, you can't take the
435.
smallest category and just say, it's just that. It's the impact on the rest of the non-residents across the board. They are carrying the tax burden for the rest of the town. And I understand, that's what we're saying, that's what this exemption's all about. But there's an increase in taxes to everybody across the board in all the categories.
Which I fully understand, but,
It's-
you know,
and it's-
the folks that I'm most concerned with are at the lowest end, which $435 is a lot of money, you know, and I'm on the 10% page, I'm not even at the 5%, you know, at the 5%, you know, 214 on the low end, $214 is a lot of money to people, and we're arguing over a $6 increase for people that, you know,
So-
aren't living at home over there, but for $311, I mean, you know, for anybody with a house over $3 million, $311 over annual period, they're not even gonna miss that. I
So-
mean, that's
so
just an
David-
assumption.
So David,
but-
just to set up the
You know-
program with the assessing office and to get the ball rolling, if we start this at 5%, we're going in, there's still a reduction, and there's not such a big increase to get it set. And then come next year, we'll have even a better picture because more people will have signed up, and we'll be able to see real numbers. We'll have them do the year-round rentals, because that's going to be important.
You mentioned at the lowest, 208 to 300,000 valuation. That would be, Mashpee residents would save $214. And you know, it's $214. That's,
Agreed.
and actually,
But at the 10%,
that would
it
mean
could be
that
435.
they wouldn't realize any increase in taxes this year. Because the taxes increase for the average household this year is gonna be $190.
196, yes.
96.
I stand corrected.
Yeah, no, no.
So, no, but so, and then the decrease would be 214 from that equation. So actually, they would, so the lowest equation is that you were referring to, is the 208 to 300,000. They would actually have a tax decrease of $10 to $20 because of this reduction and the increase in just year over year. So,
But
and
with the cost of living continuing to go up, if
yeah,
you
but-
did it at the 10%, that would,
Yes.
that would
Right.
actually, give them a further reduction to help with, offset the cost of living.
That,
fair argument.
I mean,
I
you know,
know.
that's just the way I look at it. I'm always looking at the lowest of the people most challenged, you know, where, you know, we're talking about $311 increase for the 3 million and up homes over a course of a year. And, you know, even at the 577 on the 10%, you know, over the course of a year, you know, that's gonna provide a net benefit to those lowest people, the people's most challenged, $435. You know, that's gonna further reduce their taxes by over $200 annually. I mean, the numbers, it's all in perspective how you look at it. I understand everyone's taking a hit. We're all gonna take a hit. That you're not living on the property you're paying for. Like I said, you know, it's gonna affect me. I am going to have to pay more money because I don't live at the property I pay taxes on. But I'm willing to sacrifice that because it's gonna create a greater benefit for the people hurting most.
I think it's important to look at, and not that I'm suggesting that we go to where places, towns that have established this a while ago have gone. I'm not suggesting that, but I do think it's important. If we look across Barnstable County, Barnstable's at 20%, Provincetown's at 25%, Truro's at 25%, and so is Wellfleet. So I just think those are important numbers to at least consider. And I'm not suggesting we go that high, but 5 sounds very low even as a beginning.
Well, I make a motion to
In the,
adopt the RX, which we have, but at the 5% exemption to start,
I'll second that motion. Move forward.
and go from there.
hearing it first and second, I just want to open it up for discussion on that issue. You know, on the assessment department's, the memo handed out, it was the recommendation of the Board of Assessors to recommend a residential exemption percentage no higher than 10% if
No
the
higher.
if the residential is adopted by the select board.
My
Is-
motion was for
Which
5.
is, the basis for that is the potential overlay deficit, which would hit the 2024 budgets being proposed. So I just wanted to call that to attention, that the assessors felt
Not
comfortable.
more than.
Not to
More.
exceed.
Right.
But, you know, why always go minimal?
Well, I'm
And,
going minimal
you know,
because we're going to implement a program that we don't have the true figures for.
The assessors feel as though 10% would be doable.
My
Is
motion
the way I
is,
interpret it.
my motion is for 5.
It's better to be cautious. You can start, we can always revisit if that's the case.
Next November.
Any other,
Just a point of clarity, is that wording in the motion something that is necessary to be binding?
Yes.
I can restate it, or Carol, if you want to just.
Yeah, we need it worded,
Sure.
Paul Andrews Board of Assessors, we just need it worded.
Just replace
Sure.
the last one.
And you can just
Yeah.
tail at the end there, the
I will.
percentage.
I
That's what
move
I
that-
figured.
You saw me panicking back there, didn't you?
Well, I didn't see you panic yet, but I don't want to see it.
I move that the town of Mashpee adopt a factor of 1 for all classes of property with no discount for open space or small commercial exemption, and a residential exemption of 5%. That's my motion.
Nailed it.
Thank you.
Tom, that was a re-motion.
I made the motion.
I'll second that motion. Any other further discussion on the matter?
I'd just like us to come back and just mention again, at 5%, the benefit to the people we're the most concerned about is $214 as compared to $435.
Any other discussion? Roll call vote. Carol?
Yes.
Johnny?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Michaela?
Yes.
David Whedon, yes.
Yeah.
Whew, we got through that. Give me a moment while I clear the table.
10 minutes of 9.
Towards the end of the week, I know you're gonna.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for coming in and offering comments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, for all your work.
Thank you.
Chair, if I may. Mr. Gottlieb, I'm sorry you weren't on the board to finally pass the tax exemption.
Get that in the paper.
I was going to take a picture.
No, it wasn't.
David, it was 7 years. I'll be the beast. Andy,
7 years.
but we never had the facts.
Exactly. No, it's important to have that.
Discussion approval of the tax rate, we did that.
I have some information for you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Town Manager. If you're having sidebar conversations, please step outside.
I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the next item, both parties have agreed to further negotiations regarding terms and conditions and a potential conflict resolution. I respectfully request that the Select Board table this item.
Based on Town Manager recommendations, I'd accept a motion to table.
So moved. Second.
Having a first and second, any discussion on the matter? Hearing none. Roll call. Michaela?
Yes.
Tom? John?
Yes.
Yes.
Carol? I'm a yes as well. That motion is tabled by unanimous vote. Discussion and approval of the following resignations and appointments. Board of Health, Brian Baumgartner, and his term expires June 30th, 2024. This is an anticipated resignation, as we all read in the newspaper. Very sorry to see such talent leave the Board of Health, but wish them all the best on future endeavors. Motion to accept?
Motion to accept the resignation of Brian Borgen with regret.
With
and
the best letter that's ever been written.
Exactly.
Second on that.
Having a first and second, any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call. Carol?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Tom? Michaela?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. That motion passes by unanimous vote. Barnstable County Home Consortium, Arden Russell. Her term expires January 31st, 2024. This is also a resignation. I'd accept a motion to approve the resignation as.
A motion, a second.
Hearing a first and second, any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call. Michaela?
Yes.
Yes.
Tom? John?
Yes.
Carol?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. That motion passes unanimously. Appointments, Board of Health, Edward Reposa. Term expires June 30th, 2024. I'd accept a motion to approve Ed Reposa.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Approve.
Hearing a first and second. Any discussion?
It's nice that we have some people coming before the Board of Health, which is nice.
The Board of Health is one that is critically in need of additional members, so
Yes.
anyone, members
have
of the
more coming.
audience that would like to submit letters of interest while we're still entertaining them, please step forward. Hearing a first and second, roll call vote. Carol?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Michaela? And I'm a yes as well. That vote, too, is unanimous. Welcome to the board, Mr. Reposa.
Mr. Chair, can I go back to actually Arden's resignation and actually letter of regrets? Can
Yes,
we add that-
please.
Add that to the motion?
It's a shame you're leaving that. You seem to
It
have
is.
enjoyed it. And
So I-
out of spite, it's a shame you're doing that. Because you did go to all the meetings.
I did go to all the meetings. I held that job for 10 years, and so it is a shame, but I feel that I'm representing this board, and this board clearly stated that they don't have faith in my representation of them or in my ability to represent you on affordable housing matters, and so I feel you should put it in the hands of somebody that you approve of.
Okay?
Well,
A
Mr.
letter
Chair,
of
if I may.
regret.
I just, I apologize if you took it personally, but I do, as I said it in the statement, you know, I wish if there was 2 slots open and the circumstances were different, it would have been, I guess, we wouldn't be dealing with the resignation. It's unfortunate, but.
It is unfortunate.
I do appreciate your efforts and.
Thank you.
With the committee and, but, so the motion was amended with
Yes.
letter of regrets.
Please.
Thank you.
Communications and correspondence. Moving on to new business, discussion approval of January through June 2023 Select Board meeting schedule.
A motion to approve the board's meeting schedule. When we look at our schedule like this, it looks like the end of the year comes so fast.
I know. That was a first and second.
We have a first and second. Any discussion on the coming year's meeting schedule? Hearing none. Roll call vote. Michaela?
Yes.
Yes.
Tom? John?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. That motion also is unanimous as presented. Additional topics, liaison reports. Any reports?
Yes.
Yes.
Michaela and I will be doing Thanksgiving dinners on Wednesday. Right now, I think we have 55, which is very nice, with the chamber.
Okay.
Oh, and we're looking for volunteers for the Christmas parade. So anyone who would like to volunteer, just call Julie at the Mashpee Chamber. That's all I have.
Anyone else?
Quick update from JBCC, Joint Base Cape Cod. There was a lot of discussion about the bridges coming along, it looks like right now there's a potential of 2 bridges in each location is the running proposal, but it does sound like
The funding source.
they're going nowhere fast, because we were looking at designs at a meeting 5.5 years ago at the Canal Region Chamber, so I don't think they're any further along than they are 5.5 years ago. So, and knowing there's a incredible amount of money that has to go into them to keep them up, to keep them safe, I hope they can start to move forward, but it doesn't seem like they're moving fast. Right now, they're still taking ideas on how does the public want to see, what do they want to see the bridges look like? They did that actually 5.5 years ago, and I don't really, personally, I don't know where, I thought that was in the hands of the engineers, but it's going nowhere. Also, we'll bring it up, I'll ask to add it to the next year's meeting, next meeting, as far as their potential renewal of the base on a lease from the government. So, but we'll put that on the agenda for next week. But it did come up in a discussion meeting.
Okay. So the liaison assignments, I did ask folks to review them, send me any kind of suggestions that they may have. John had a couple, some of his changes were similar to mine. There were several that needed to be assigned. Michaela did get most of those. And I did get rid of some of mine to take on a few of the ones that needed to be assigned. So the way I have it is, for myself, I'm going to stay on as the liaison to the clerk, treasurer, and accounting, Community Preservation Act, the South Beach Advisory, the Environmental Oversight Committee, Conservation, and I'd like to take on the Zoning Board of Appeals. John will stay as the Affirmative Action, American with Disabilities Committee, Capital Improvement Committee, Historical Information Technology Library, Military Civilian Advisory Council, and the school. Tom O'Hara will stay on as the Affordable Housing, Building and Inspections, Fire, Police, Planning, Construction Committee. I distributed the Water District.
David, excuse me just a minute. Where did the Zoning Board of Appeals go?
To myself.
David? Okay, thank you.
Water District and Board of Health. Just trying to keep everything kind of evenly numbered as far as the responsibilities. Carol Sherman will stay as Chamber of Commerce, Economic Development, Human Resources, Public Works, Recreation, Special Events Committee. I tasked her with Council on Aging, Human Services as well. Michaela, you have Harbor Management Committee, Native American Affairs, Planning, Waterways, FinCom, Board of Assessors, Natural Resources, and the Mashpee-Wakeby Lake Management. We have a lot of committees. The only one I didn't add, we're all getting, quite a few. The only one I didn't add was the wastewater management, and was wondering who, if anyone wanted to sign up for that. I know it's a heavy lift.
I've been
If you didn't-
attending them, if it's all the same to you. I've been attending the wastewater committee meetings for the past 6 months.
Okay, that's fine.
So-
If nobody wanted to, I would take it on. It is something I care deeply about and would take that on. So that's what I have. I can give this to you.
Oh, great, thank you.
And so there's a copy it can be distributed after it's cleaned up. Water quality updates, hearing none, we'll move past that item.
Just
Town-
one thing, we do have the sewer schedules posted on the website and Facebook, just want everybody to be aware of that, so if they have some information that they are looking for, it should be there. That's what I've been told.
It's on our website, plus on the Sewer Commission's website as well. And it did go out on Facebook as soon as we got the information, so,
They started digging.
yes, in
Thanks.
Carlton Drive. yeah.
I see some land clearing over there, so stuff's happening.
Yes.
Town manager updates?
Yes, we did have some concerns expressed from the school administration relative to our last voting at Quashnet. So I'm just going to wave the caution flag to the select board that we may have to look at some alternative ideas. I've been speaking with the school committee chair, superintendent, and there are some concerns about conducting voting at the school when school is in session. So I think it is obviously going to result in further discussion, but I just want to make you aware that those discussions are going on. Ultimately, obviously, before anything happens, we'll be coming back
What
to
if
the
we change it
select
to
board.
like a Saturday? I mean, or do it when they have an in-service day?
Oh, I can't
We
speak for the
talked about the
school.
in-service days for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we used to do it on a Saturday, Carol, but they
Yeah.
switched it
They
to a
did.
Tuesday
I know.
long ago.
It's a shame.
Well, and you're talking about voting.
Voting.
Yeah, the voting was on Saturday, and obviously that's changed. But at any rate, just putting that on your radar, because it's definitely on mine. I did request a reserve fund transfer. Our postage and advertising got a little out of whack because of the special election and also because of the mailings for the residential exemption. So we don't have any wiggle room there considering what we were spending. So I'm just letting the select board know that I did go to the finance committee, when was it, last week?
Yeah, I believe.
Last week, and they approved the transfer. So they've got a $100,000 reserve fund, and we've taken a portion of it. Holiday parade, December 10th, and obviously the town offices are closed this Thursday and Friday. And I think that's it, unless I missed something. Thank you.
No executive session. I take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.